What is going on, boys and girls? Welcome back for another video. It has been a while since I've done a tutorial or any one of these types of videos, so today we're actually going to be replacing the motor in the SCX24 with this Injora 66T motor. We're also going to install the Hot Racing front overdrive transmission. You will notice that I've trimmed one of the tabs off of the battery tray. You will need to do that to accommodate the larger motor. If you are going to put in a longer motor, you can keep the other three, but this tab ends up being in the way. Since we are going to install an overdrive front gear set, what I've done here is a crude test. I put electrical tape on the same positions of the front and rear wheels. We're just going to verify that the stock drive is a 1-to-1 ratio. It should be. We're going to turn on the truck, and we will verify that they spin at the same rate. And then after we're done, we'll see if the front is overdriven. So here we go. So if I stop, we'll try to get them both lined up about 12 o'clock here. So the rear is about almost 12, and so is the front. That does confirm that it's a 1-to-1 drive from the front to the rear. So go ahead and shut the truck off. We will talk about the tools we need to get the job started. So you're going to need a 1mm Allen, a 1.5mm Allen, and I believe it is a 4mm box wrench. We'll see when we get down to the spur gear, but I believe it's a 4mm nut that holds on the spur. If not, we have this 4-way wrench that comes with just about any RC vehicle these days. The other thing to just note while I'm thinking about it is off camera, I ended up lubricating the gears just with a little bit of grease, just a small layer, just because these are metal gears. You don't want metal on metal if you can help it. The last thing that we'll want is a little bit of blue Loctite. Screws are obviously going into aluminum, so you'll want a little bit of blue Loctite there just to keep everything tight. So with that said, we can go ahead in here and get started. So first things first, all 1mm. I've got 3 left, 3 of the different screws for my battery tray. Zoom in a little bit. Have the other 2 battery tray screws here and here, so you'll want to remove those. And as you can see, the tray will come right out. Put that aside, somewhere you're not going to lose it. The next thing I like to do is flip the truck upside down. You're going to undo the 2 1mm screws that hold in these links into your center block. And what that's going to allow is your rear axle housing to pivot, and that will allow your rear drive shaft to come out much more easily once you get the transmission screws out. So these links, these aftermarket links, are a little bit stiffer than stock, but they should pop out just like that. And that should allow the drive shaft, the rear drive shaft, to pop out just like that. So that's what you're looking for. That'll allow just enough play in this rear axle to pop that out. Next thing, doesn't really matter because this all has to come out. This guy right here, this screw's got to come out. And then there are 2 on the bottom. So let's go ahead and take that guy out. Now we're going to want to remove these 2 screws here that hold in the transmission. So now we should be able to lift the whole transmission and motor up and out. So there you go. That's all there is to that. And here is our motor and transmission assembly. This is a stock gear train, and that's pretty much that. So we'll remember that the front drive shaft is the shorter one, the rear drive shaft is the longer one, because those will need to come off. We'll want to undo these 2 screws right here on the back of the motor mount plate. Let's go ahead and take those off. Those are also 1mm. Alright, so now our cover is off here. So we're going to reuse this. Put that off to the side. Now, so now we're down to the your pinion gear from your motor and your spur gear. Let's check this nut size. I believe this is 4mm, like I mentioned earlier, as this will have to come off. Yep, so this is a 4mm nut, so we won't need the 4-way wrench that I showed earlier. So, okay. Let's go ahead and get these drive shafts off. These should also be 1mm. Okay. Let's take the rear off here. Now what we'll do is let's set this guy aside. We're not going to really reuse anything here except for we're going to reuse the motor cover, and we're going to reuse the spur gear, of course. But let's move over to the new transmission here. Our new transmission and our new motor plate here. So what I'm going to do is orient this correctly, so it's going to be oriented like so, and then you're going to put your motor plate on like so. Get a little blue on here. Okay. Alright. Snug that down. Doesn't need to be reefed super tight, but just snug. Long threads. Okay, there's screw number 2. Nice and snug. 2 more to go. Rinse and repeat. I've got the stock transmission, and now what we're going to do is we're going to remove the spur gear, because we're going to need to reuse that along with the spur gear nut. So take that guy off and place it somewhere you're not going to lose it. And the spur gear should pull right off. And this is where I had mentioned we will need the 1.5. So I picked up my 1.5 driver here. And these are the motor mount screws, or the motor screws rather. So let's go ahead and orient the new motor the way that we want it. So it's going to sit in the truck like this. So you want to be able to read the logo facing the outside. Let's go ahead and start these screws. So it's important to get this one screw in, otherwise you make the mistake that I just made, and you won't be able to get to it freely with the spur gear on. So let's go ahead and slip the spur gear on next. Very nice, very nice. Let's go ahead and remember we left the nut. I like to do this, leave the nut right inside of the driver here, and we know where it is. Once again, we'll just screw that on snugly, not over tightened. Next, let's talk about gear mesh. Gear mesh refers to the amount of gap you have in between your pinion gear teeth and your spur gear teeth. You don't want it too tight with no gap at all, because what will happen is the motor will run hot, you could burn it up, it'll be a noisy gear train, all those kinds of things. You don't want to run it too loose where the gears barely touch, otherwise you can strip these out because these are only plastic. So you want to have it where there's just a little bit of play in between the two. This is really kind of, there's a lot of different theories about how to do this. I kind of just, I don't want to say eyeball it, because I don't eyeball it, I actually do it by feel. I allow the gears to mesh tightly, and then I just back it off ever so slightly, so there's a very small amount of wiggle between the two. So let's see if we can see inside of here. There's just the slightest bit of play. I don't know if you can see that on the camera. Just the smallest amount of play between the gear set. Just a little wiggle. That's kind of where I like it. People have differing opinions on these. What I am going to do, first of all, let's do this. I always like to test before we go ahead and tighten things down. Let's hook up our battery. And let's hook up our motor. These are keyed. They can only go in one way, so make sure your tab goes in the proper way. Radio on. Truck on. Okay. And we're going to test our new motor. Ooh. That is nice and smooth. Smooth and quiet. So let's go ahead and kill this. Radio off. So now that everything is right where I want it, I'm going to remove the spur gear and just tighten down that top screw, because I don't recall, I don't think I really snugged it down. Okay, right back into place there. Mesh is good. Check our mesh again. See, that's a good view. I can see that through the camera. You can see just a little bit of wiggle. Alright guys, so all I did off camera is I bottomed this pinion out. Not completely against the motor mount, of course, but I pushed it on the motor shaft. Now you can see how the shaft is sitting just a little bit proud of the gear, so you got a really good mesh there. Nice and clean. Gear runs true. Everything's good. Let's go ahead and remember, let's put our drive shafts back on, and what I said earlier, the shorter one goes to the front. This is just threading into the plastic here, I believe, so don't go crazy on these. There we go. Okay, tighten this guy up here. Look at that fancy red motor plate. Come on, baby. There we go. It's closing that gap nicely. Don't snug that one all the way down until you get the other one started. So these are just going into plastic, so no need to have these super tight. So now we can begin to put it back in the truck. The next thing we're going to go over is drive shaft phasing. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a picture up on the screen right now that shows the proper way that you want to phase these drive shafts. You want to have this U-joint right here be in alignment in the same orientation as this guy down here. So the next trick to do is to get this oriented like so, and then slip the drive shafts into the yokes here, get them properly phased, and then screw this back into the truck. So I'm going to put these drive shafts back in off camera, and we'll get you guys right back on. Got our drive shaft properly phased here. We have this guy aligned with this guy. So we're going to do that same thing on the other side, on the rear drive shaft. Started putting in the motor plate screws. So I got one in. I'm going to do the second one here. So now we got the rear drive shaft in. So off camera I put in the one link, and now we're just going to screw in the other link here. Put our battery tray in. Line it within the frame rails there. There we are. Okay. So now let's go ahead and put the battery in. Alright guys, so everything is buttoned up, motor's plugged in, ready to test. Let's turn the radio on. Let's see if we have front overdrive. Turn the truck on. Okay. So once again, with our tape roughly in the same position on both wheels. So if we give her, we should see that they're in different positions, and they are. So the overdrive transmission does in fact work. So let me get the tools picked up and we'll take it for a test. It's a couple days later. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to get the overdrive transmission to run smoothly. What you didn't see in the last clip is I didn't actually take it for a drive on camera, but the truck was effectively stuttering really bad at slow speeds. Like anytime you would travel and try to crawl with it, it'd do one of these lurching, like essentially almost like that, you know, it just kind of creep along. And then the faster you went, the more it tended to smooth out, but it's a freaking crawler. You're going to want to go slow most of the time. I talked to the local hobby shop about it. One of the guys seemed to think it was normal, and then I'm glad another employee happened to be around who had run that transmission before, and he said his did not lurch like that at slow speed. So if you guys have any thoughts, suggestions, comments, let me know down below. Otherwise, for now, I'll just keep the 66T in there for the moment and keep running this stock transmission. And I'll probably give the overdrive another chance at some point, maybe see what I can find online. But in any case, thanks for watching, guys. If you enjoyed the video, if it was helpful, please give it a like and consider subscribing. Appreciate the support, and I will catch you guys on the next one. Later.